rebellion or a war with Rome. And, this went on for a while. So the temple priest and these people was bought off and put in power to basically try to keep the Jews calm and keep them, from trying to rebel and revolt against Rome. So we had this going for a while, and eventually, of course, we would get the Jewish War because the Jews couldn't take it, much longer. The taxation and so many different things that was going on, Jews basically had it, and it's not clear 100% as to what sparked the Jewish War, but it's believed to be so many different things. But in any case, you had, Titus Flavius, what have you, the Romans, let's just say, go in and basically start destroying the Jewish temple. War broke out. Jews was defeated. Temple was basically burnt down. They went on a week, month, or however long burning spree where they supposedly took Jewish manuscripts and books or what have you and burnt them all, which is supposedly the reason for them hiding the Dead Sea Scrolls, because Rome was going out and taking everything that the Jews had, supposedly burning it up. Now, history does support this whole Roman book burning and everything like that, and it's a reason for that, of course, when we're going to go back and look. But it would make sense for them to do all this because of the fact they knew they wanted to, in the future, control history. So you have to get rid of the past. Things have to be changed. And one of the main things that had to be changed was language, of course, which we're going to get into. So they went out, they burnt every book they can find, manuscripts or what have you. And this basically led to the Jews, scattering and basically separating from out of Judea, and enter in now the control Arabs and the Greeks, and they would basically occupy Israel, up until now, and mixing and everything like that. And this is how they came to be. But Rome would basically come in and control that land for good, and not have no more rebellions or problems from the people until they got their religion in place. Now, that's sometime after this, after the whole Jewish War. After, you start to see Judaism kind of sort of dwindle and disappear for a while. It's sometime around this point where the New Testament was established. And they basically established it because of that reason. You had a lot of the doctrine gone. A lot of the Jews was lost. And it was the perfect time for them to basically inject their doctrine. So we still got to go back and look at the fact that you have Antigonus, who basically was walking around saying he was the rightful king of the Jews, and he was crucified. Later, same thing would happen with Jesus. He would, go around preaching he's the Son of God, King of the Jews, and he was crucified. So we have to look at that comparison. I definitely don't think it was a coincidence that this is happening. You also have to look at the fact that you have Acts. In Acts 11:26, it says that basically they were first called Christians in Antioch, and Antioch is where Antigonus is basically crucified. So I definitely don't think that's a coincidence that it's saying that, they was first called Christians in Antioch, probably because when Antigonus was killed, they would later use that crucifixion as a story for Jesus Christ. So you have the Jews under the conquest of the Greeks for a period of time. Hellenistic Jews that was Hellenized, supposedly, and converted into the Hellenistic doctrine, whatever that is. And as I said to you guys, there was no such thing as no Jews back then, and that the people that was Hellenized was actually Africans in African territories. And basically, this doctrine of Judaism was created and forced on these Africans to go out and spread. And when you go and look deeper into Judaism, as I said, you have ancient Greek mythology in the Old Testament with, Pandora's box, Eve, and Deucalion and Pharaoh, Noah's Ark, so on and so forth. So, again, when you go back and start looking at a lot of these stories, especially told by Europeans, you can't really give a lot of this stuff validity. I mean, it's really hard to put into context. Now, with these stories about the, Antigonus and his father, what have you, it's more to support these stories than biblical stories. These are not biblical stories. It's actually Roman history. So we can look at these and give validity to it, but it doesn't fit, again, with what the Bible has been telling us and what the actions of the Romans would be if they actually believed in this so-called Jesus or what have you. It's like, okay, so you have the Old Testament Jews, right, who, if the Septuagint is correct, these people are supposedly chosen people and everything like that. Why would Rome go and oppress these Jews? Why would they mess with these Jews if these are supposedly God's chosen people? Now, according to them, around this time, Septuagint is alive and well. So the Old Testament. So Rome would have to look at this and say, well, these people are chosen. We can't do this stuff to these people, but they do it. This is how you can look at it and say, well, it doesn't fit. It's some bullshit. Because when Rome took power, they would basically carry on Hellenization. The only way you would do such a thing is if you are the same people. You have the same agenda. And that's exactly what it was. So we can look at the story. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit with biblical history. It doesn't fit with the actions of the Greeks and the Romans. Why do such a thing? If you would later basically just jump on the religion and piggyback off of it and give us Christianity. So, and then say, well, everything that the Jews was talking about was real because we have it in our doctrine called the Bible. It don't make sense. So you are oppressing the Jews and everything that's happening with the Jews, but you agree that these are chosen people. It don't fit. So we got to look at that. But again, you have Jesus, as I said, walking around. All the stuff that's been happening to the Jews. You have Jesus walking around preaching to basically forget about it, turn the other cheek, love your masters, servants obey your masters. It says, again, in Romans, you have a book of Romans in the New Testament. But how would any Jew fall for that? If you're following the whole biblical series that I've been putting out, just so far where we at, everything the Jews been through. Everything these people been through, you get up to Jesus and it's like changed. This dude comes along and he has a whole new set of rules. Basically telling the Jews for hundreds of years, you've been praying wrong. This is the way you're supposed to pray. The whole thing has changed. The promise of God has changed now. Everybody can be saved. You are not the chosen people no more. So forget about the whole prophecy thing that, you disobeyed God and now you cursed and all this stuff supposed to happen. No matter no more because everybody can be saved through Jesus. So everything's different. Everything's changed. So what you basically have is, Rome seeing an opportunity once Judaism basically dwindled or whatever it was. They seen an opportunity, as I said, to basically create their doctrine and instill it. Because now you have the Jews scattered and a lot of these people in the territory now looking for a religion or a doctrine to believe in. Now, if it's true and they did go and burn a lot of the manuscripts and a lot of the books that the Jews had, then it's not a real clear understanding on what the religion was. And as I said, they do things generationally. So they indoctrinate the children and then so on and so forth. This is how it's done. This is how they can get the belief system, to continue or to begin. And what they basically did was create the doctrine. Plain and simple. It's not a coincidence that it's written in Greek just as the Old Testament was. And again, we never had any Old Testament written in Hebrew. And it's something you got to look at. You got to remember, and this is another one of the crazy parts, because I don't think Hebrew is as old as people think it is. And it's hard to understand. Okay, you have, Ptolemy II Philadelphus wanting a translation of the Hebrew law to Greek. Okay, so 6 elders, so 70 elders total to come and do this translation. Suffice it to say that it had to be some people still left speaking Hebrew around this time. You got the 70 elders. We can say that, the Hebrew language was going strong. You got 70 elders to come and do a translation. First of all, if you never had an understanding or a translation of the Hebrew law, why would you want one? What is the point of having one? Why would you go through all this, as I talked about with the LXX letters of Orestes? Why would you want this translation? Again, it doesn't fit with the actual true actions of the Greeks for them to actually go through all this and get this translation. It don't work. It doesn't fit. So to do this translation, and you have the Septuagint, and it seems as if just the Hebrew language vanishes. It just disappears. So remember, you had all this time from the time of the Septuagint up until the creation of the Vetus Latina. All these Jews in between this time is speaking Greek. No one is speaking Hebrew. You have Aramaic, which we know Jesus was supposed to have spoken, and the people that was in Judea during that time was speaking Aramaic, not Hebrew. You have Aramaic, you have Syriac. Now, it's one of the biggest things people confuse, because they think a lot of the people that's in Israel right now and speaking Hebrew when they speak in Yiddish. You know, they speak in a different form of so-called Hebrew or Paleo-Hebrew, which they always get into the Paleo-Hebrew crap, try to cover up the language. But remember, you have the Hebrew language basically becoming a dead language, and it wasn't until I believe the 1800s, 1886 I think it was, when they started to basically re-spark and re-speak Hebrew. I mean, just think about that. You have now, during this time, okay, you have Rome giving us the New Testament. You have Rome giving us all these different versions. You have the Vetus Latina, then you have the Latin Vulgate. You have all the codexes, Codex Vaticanus, Sinaiticus, Alexandrinus, all these codices. And then you have between 700 and 1000 BCE, we began to get our Hebrew manuscripts with the Masoretic texts. Then you have the Aleppo Codex, and you have the Leningrad Codex. All this between 700 and 1000. And also in between that time, you have the creation of the Quran. So you have, again, you got to look at it, pay attention, something that's fishy. You have the fall of Judea, supposedly. And then all of a sudden, we get the New Testament. We get finally, we get a Hebrew codex. We get the Quran. We get all these biblical manuscripts. And religion basically begins to take over and rule. Plain and simple. And at the head of it, you have the Romans. Plain and simple. It's not a coincidence all this is going on. We can't take any of this stuff and put any validity into it coming from the same people. The people who oppressed us, people who enslaved us. Plain and simple. The people who, by their own admission, was basically going against the Bible while giving the world the Bible. So if you want to look at it, you have basically a complete, turnaround. If you want to go from the whole thing, you have the Greeks conquering and establishing these doctrines with Judaism and using it to rule. You have Rome come in and basically assume power. So the doctrine changes to what they would later use to establish more power and gain more control of countries or what have you. So, religion had its time. It had its time where it ruled and it was set in place, and many different civilizations used it to control the people, and that's what it was about. But Rome was always behind it, and we can see where Christianity popped up at in different countries. You had this taxation from the Pope, from Rome. These places was paying taxes, and the Pope basically had religious laws that people were supposed to follow that would basically benefit the empire. And, we can see this with England, and the reason why, they was controlled by Rome, and the tax money that they paid them, and how everything was set up to benefit the Roman Empire, who by that time was super powerful. But we got to still, go back and look at all this stuff and how they can explain that this language that's supposed to have been spoken in ancient and everything like that seems to have been, gone for so long and just popped up. And now a lot of people are speaking it. That's one of the major keys to the Hebrew thing that I think they don't understand, is how you keep talking about Hebrew and you're supposed to have this language and we can't find it. For all these years, hundreds of years, you had the people reading from a Greek Septuagint, a Greek manuscript, supposing Jews reading Greek. The Hebrew was supposed to have an oral tradition where they kept the doctrine orally. So you would expect the language to be, kept as well. So for that language not to be passed down and kept orally with the Jews is crazy. You only see it later on, and that's what people get confused. You have them talking about stuff that they put in place after the fact that was never in place, before the fact. So all the stuff they saying that, the Hebrew is supposed to have this oral tradition and the Hebrew is supposed to have these manuscripts, we can't find none of this stuff. And the reason why we can't, because these people didn't exist. The people that we're talking about and all this stuff, this conquering in these wars, we're talking about African people that was doing all of this. This is all dealing with African people and us basically trying to keep and fight for the territory we had that Rome was trying to take from us. And it's a history that we see clear as day with Rome. Even I was talking about before with the Aksum Empire. Rome's coming in and they're basically stealing stuff. And you had the whole war with Haile Selassie's in Rome. This is history. This real history that you don't see in the history books that they're keeping from people. It doesn't fit with biblical history at all and the actions of these people. Stuff is made up. And that's the point of this video, to get you to understand that these chunks, this history that we're talking about from the conquest of the Greeks all the way up until the installment of the Roman Empire and the creation of biblical religion as we know it, we can't follow none of this stuff. It's all bullshit. We don't know what's real and what's not. We can't find no real proof except for the fact that we know we had these established wars between the people of that land and the Roman Empire, plain and simple. And you can look at it as simple conquest and them just taking lands, whatever like that. But we got to look deeper at it and see that this is the implementation of a doctrine that they would use to basically, take over. So now all of this will be obvious, especially the whole part with the language. People just looking at that and saying, well, I just can't accept the fact that for so long these people didn't speak Hebrew. And then it just comes out of nowhere as this established ancient language that these people supposed to have spoken, but clearly didn't, because we don't find any manuscripts or anything or any biblical anything in Hebrew before the Septuagint Greek. And by their own admission, these people were speaking Greek, reading Greek, speaking Aramaic, Syriac, no Hebrew. It's like the proudest thing that you are proud of, you didn't even do during ancient times. It don't make no sense. So then you have later on, we have where Dr. Joseph Yehuda giving us the Hebrew is Greek book, where he proves that the Greeks created Hebrew and Arabic. So that all fits in with everything that we are seeing with the Roman Empire giving us later, the manuscripts.